We are just so excited to lead off the Fall 2016 webinar series with our session. And I also wanted to thank the NACADA Advisor Training and Development Commission for sponsoring our webinar today. My name is Dawn Fettig, and I currently hold an elected volunteer position on the NACADA Board of Directors. I also work as an advising administrator at the University of Colorado Boulder in the College of Arts and Sciences. Josh, will you introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Josh Morrison. I'm the Director of Academic Advising at Ivy Tech Community College for the Kokomo and Lafayette regions. Thanks for joining us.
And I'm Megan Stevenson. I'm also from the University of Colorado Boulder in the Arts and Sciences Academic Advising Center. We're excited to share with you the next hour as we discuss practical strategies for dealing with complaints while raising compassion satisfaction.
Thanks, Megan. So now that you know who we are, let's review what we're going to talk about. So our goals for this session, we will discuss how to apply best practices to individual interactions in a complaint scenario. We will also spotlight approaches for delivering bad news and managing conflict. And we want participants to be able to develop some strategies for recognizing and dealing with secondary trauma and compassion fatigue. We also want to talk about some strategies to reduce job stress and burnout, and to talk about some self-care strategies for yourself as well as others. Basically, working with humans equals stress. It's just the nature of the beast. Today, we're going to talk through a few actual scenarios that Megan and I worked with at CU Boulder in our roles as advising administrators. And then using these scenarios as a starting point, Josh will talk about what you may experience with compassion fatigue and how you can work towards compassion satisfaction. How can we have these difficult yet crucial conversations and have positive outcomes? This doesn't necessarily mean giving the person what they want. So now I'm going to turn it over to Megan to talk about some techniques you can use in those crucial conversations.
To set the stage for student interaction, many students have already learned how or are currently learning how to advocate for themselves and may have a negative association with tattling or snitching. They usually do not want to get anybody in trouble, yet they realize they wish to find a better fit for their advising needs. For the advising administrator, it's important to provide a safe, caring environment for the student to express their concerns and develop a resolution that meets everyone's desired outcome. As you explore the complaint or situation, please remember that there are three sides to every story: yours, mine, and the truth. As advising administrators, we aren't here to take sides. We need to remain neutral and solution-focused. During this presentation, we want to reiterate that the student isn't always right. For example, the student may have unrealistic expectations of the advising appointment or the role of their academic advisor. It is our role, however, to listen to the student and take appropriate action, which often means becoming an advocate for that student. As Dr. Seuss so eloquently said it, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing's going to get better. It's not. With that said, we will discuss a few different approaches and techniques that may be helpful while working with complaints in order to achieve positive and desirable outcomes. Dawn will highlight the first, which is one that many of you have heard of or may currently employ. Dawn?
Thanks, Megan. So we've talked about setting the stage. At CU Boulder, one of the advising models we use is appreciative advising. This model easily lends itself to use for advisors and advising administrators in difficult conversations. Of course, this is just one approach, and there are many others. You'll want to find the one that feels most natural to you. A great way to explore a variety of approaches is with this book. So let's talk about those appreciative advising phases. The disarm phase. In many ways, this is the most important stage because, as Megan said, students usually are reluctant to tattle to authorities. And by the way, no matter how nice and approachable you are, no matter your level, you are an authority in the eyes of students. So students may worry that if they complain about someone, that person might get in trouble or even get fired. That's a pretty serious outcome. In the disarm phase, you want to make a positive first impression with the student, to build rapport, and to try and create a safe, welcoming space. Discover. We want to discover the real issue. What does the student need or want from advising? What are they saying and not saying? Asking positive, open-ended questions will help advisors and administrators learn about the student's strengths, skills, and abilities. For DREAM, we're going to ask them questions like, what are they hoping for in the advising relationship? In a perfect world, what would this look like? Have they had good experiences with advising before, and what made that a good interaction? We want to inquire about the students' hopes and dreams for their future. In the design phase, we want to collaborate on what's realistic for both the student and the advisor. We want to co-create a plan for making their dreams a reality. In the deliver phase, we want to think about what can I do or change for the student with those realistic expectations in mind. Some ideas are change advisor assignments, coaching the student on advisor interactions, and helping to align expectations and responsibilities of both the student and the advisor. The student delivers on the plan created during the design phase, and the advisor or administrator is available to encourage and support the student. And finally, don't settle. Whether you are an advisor or an administrator, set a timeline for the student to check back in with you, if appropriate. Advisors and students alike need to set their own internal bars of expectations high. We know from experience that this generation of students knows how to meet expectations, so it's more important than ever to set those expectations very high. So now I'm going to turn it over to Megan to tell us a little bit more about mediation techniques.
Thanks, Dawn. I've been a certified professional conflict mediator since 2009. I've come to realize that mediation is not all that different from advising and from being an advising administrator. With that said, there are strategies that are employed in mediation settings that also apply to advising settings. Effective mediators strive to recognize and honor diversity. Mediators embrace diversity in all its forms and strive for an inclusive process that fosters an open, enlightened, and productive environment. We all have different backgrounds and experiences, and that's beautiful. It's one of the great things about working with humans. Effective mediators strive to be open-minded. Mediators believe that a free exchange of ideas is valuable and is promoted by an outward demonstration of respect for all parties. Providing a safe space to discuss what is going on in one's life is incredibly valuable. And effective mediators also strive to be caring. Mediators promote mutual respect, trust, and support to foster the building or rebuilding of relationships that strengthen organizations and communities. Does any of this sound familiar? It should. As advisors, we are employing these same techniques. And whether you're a certified mediator or not, as an advising administrator or academic advisor, you often play the role of the impartial third party, working through a conflict or misunderstanding. NACADA's second core value even states that advisors serve as mediators and facilitators who effectively use their specialized knowledge and experience for student benefit. Advisors recognize their limitations and make referrals to qualified persons when appropriate. To connect academic advising to students' lives, advisors actively seek resources and inform students of specialists who can further assess student needs and provide access to appropriate programs and services. Advisors help students integrate information so they can make well-informed academic decisions. In advising, we are hopefully bringing our best selves to the table. We show respect for our students and colleagues. We support different ideas. We recognize and honor different backgrounds, beliefs, and approaches. And we learn about our students through conversation and the exchange of ideas. As an advisor, as you probably are well aware, we have many roles and responsibilities. NACADA's second core value even states that, or the sixth core value, I apologize, advisors establish appropriate relationships and boundaries with advisees and create environments that promote physical, emotional, and spiritual health. So, as students see you as a resource, be aware that this can, and often will, mean that they also see you as a place to share frustrations or complaints. Now that I've touched on two different approaches that may be utilized during these difficult yet oh so important conversations to help promote positive outcomes. Now Josh will shed some light on another aspect of working in a helping profession.
Thanks, Megan. Working with people, particularly students going through developmental changes over time, can be both rewarding and distressing. The role of an academic advisor is multifaceted and involves doing helping work. Helping work is really about assisting others in the context of advising, helping others define and achieve their academic and career goals. In the process of helping work, advisors and advising administrators can experience compassion fatigue and compassion satisfaction. Both of these contribute to professional quality of life. Briefly, compassion fatigue is defined as the coincidence of job burnout and secondary traumatic stress among helping professionals. Job burnout can arise when advisors are experiencing a high caseload, expanded duties and responsibilities, and physical or emotional fatigue. Advisors may feel irritable, impatient, or easily frustrated when burnt out. And burnout, when occurring over time, can lead to decreased job satisfaction, decreased effectiveness, poor teamwork, and other behaviors that can damage a high-functioning workplace. Secondary traumatic stress, briefly, is comprised of negative and intrusive thoughts and feelings as a result of doing helping work with people undergoing traumatic circumstances. It occurs most often in helping professionals working in the medical and social work or counseling fields where practitioners are interacting daily with clients undergoing significant personal trauma, either mental, physical, or both. Academic advisors who develop relationships with students over time may also experience secondary traumatic stress, given the personal nature of self-disclosure students often make in advising sessions. Those experiencing secondary traumatic stress may be unable to concentrate, sleep well, and experience negative, intrusive thoughts, and even terror at certain triggering events. You may be thinking to yourself, that sounds like me. When I first discovered this area of inquiry, I often wondered why I was so exhausted at the end of every workday. Sure, I'd put in a good 8 hours and worked with many students, answered emails, and collaborated with others. I may have even taught a class or participated in a committee. But I hadn't picked up anything heavier than a mug of coffee, and I was physically spent and drained. Why was that? Compassion fatigue, as the coincidence of burnout and secondary traumatic stress, has a few common symptoms that advisors and advising administrators can look out for in themselves and others. Decreased satisfaction in working with students, a feeling that nothing you ever do is good enough or makes a difference, apathy and isolation, as well as depersonalization are common symptoms. Intrusive thoughts that disturb normal functioning and sleep can occur in more severe cases when you work closely with students who are undergoing significant personal traumas such as assault, homelessness, divorce, or other serious personal concerns. Both job burnout and secondary traumatic stress are factors in compassion fatigue, and so a high and demanding workload that never seems to stop, lack of breaks and vacation, perfectionism in self and toward others, and exposure to students undergoing significant life traumas are all factors that can lead to compassion fatigue. As helping professionals who care about and for their students, there can be a cost to this caring. Now turning to the positive aspects of doing helping work, many advisors and advising administrators can experience compassion and satisfaction in their interactions with the students that they help. Briefly, compassion and satisfaction includes the positive emotions and feelings resulting from doing helping work well and seeing the results of your helping work and that of others in your group. In the advising context, working with students and seeing them become successful is useful in growing one's level of compassion satisfaction. A grateful word from a student, a thoughtful gesture from a colleague, or a word of approval from a supervisor can all serve to fill your bucket with positivity and warmth. Seeing a student cross the stage at graduation that you work so diligently with, or a student finally have that aha moment in your office when they put it all together. These experiences are the stuff of compassion and satisfaction, and filling your bucket daily helps improve our effectiveness, teamwork, and functioning as an individual, advisor, or advising administrator, and as a member of the student success team. Now I'd like to turn over to Dawn for our first case study.
Thanks, Josh. So I just want to point out, if you have printed out our slide handout, that some of the slides in the case study are not there because we didn't want you to have all of the secrets before we did our presentation. So let's start off with our first scenario. This is fairly common, should sound familiar to most of you. So we'll start off with Emily. Emily had Anna as her advisor and thought Anna was wonderful. Anna was extremely helpful and knowledgeable. Anna was interested in Emily and what Emily wanted. If Anna didn't know the answer, she didn't act like she did. She was honest and would find out the answer and get back to Emily. Anna was timely with her responses and just incredible. Then Anna left, and Emily was put with a new advisor, Maya. Emily thinks that Maya is very nice. However, she seems inexperienced, less knowledgeable, And Emily often feels like Maya is just telling her what she wants to hear instead of giving her advice or answers that are true and helpful. Emily feels as though Maya is not helping her and doesn't address her concerns well. Emily would prefer an advisor who is more experienced and knows her when she walks into their office. Emily asks you, "Will you be my new advisor?" You hesitate before answering. So there's some things to consider here, right? So do you take the student? Your answer is probably, it depends. The next thought is, do you tell the supervisor? Again, it depends. Do you feel like this is an isolated incident? Is it the first time someone has asked you this, or have there been many times? Do you feel the student's concerns are well-founded? If you do decide to tell the supervisor, how might they support both of you? So first off, how are new advisors being trained and supported? Will this result in an informal coaching session with the new advisor? So how can the supervisor help you, the experienced advisor, feel supported and not overburdened? Let's go to Josh for more on role ambiguity.
Thanks, Dawn. This situation can be a significant cause of stress and anxiety for the advisor involved, having to work with a student who places them on the spot in a moment where they may least expect it. In this scenario, the responding advisor is caught somewhat betwixt and between. As advisors, we are in a role of helping and of service. Our role is to meet student needs, and we are often rewarded professionally by going above and beyond for students to ensure that they are satisfied and are happy with the services they receive. This situation brings up issues of role confusion as well as role conflict. With role ambiguity or role confusion, the responding advisor must navigate the obligation to be a good and sympathetic listener, advocate for students, as well as to maintain professionalism and collegiality as a coworker. This advisor must decide, often on the spot, how to both support the student and support Amia, the advisor. In a related matter, the advisor is also in a position of role conflict. The obligations toward the student and to the colleague can be seen as in conflict, with no good middle ground on which to stand. The advisor as supportive colleague and friend may come to the defense of Maya, emphasizing her enthusiasm and preparation to the job, but the advisor as student advocate may take a different approach and be seen as taking the student's side against Maya, who you must assume is doing the best job that she can with the preparation and training she's been provided. Both these issues at play, the responding advisor can experience some level of undue stress, leading to a heightened risk of burnout as it relates to work responsibilities and navigating the sometimes complex and confusing set of responsibilities and expectations that are the part of many advisors' responsibilities. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Dawn to let you know the actual outcome of this situation.
Thanks, Josh. So what really happened? When Megan and I presented this case at the last annual conference, we learned that this is a very common scenario. Students will ask to change advisors for all sorts of reasons. Maybe they think they can get an earlier appointment. Maybe they just don't connect with their assigned person. And maybe they're shopping for a better answer to their question. You just don't know unless you ask. In this case, the student learned about a new minor program before any of the advising staff because it was marketed directly to students from one of the vice chancellors. The student assumed the advisor didn't know about it because they were new and lacked a strong knowledge base. The advisor assumed there was no such minor because they hadn't heard about it yet. Both sides were just a little bit off the mark. With the student, I focused on appropriate expectations for the advising relationship and asked them to try again before we made any switches. With the advisor, I focused on how to say, "I don't know," without sounding like they don't know anything. This was an informal coaching session. And by the way, if a supervisor does have a coaching session with an employee, they are not allowed to share that with the rest of the team. Hopefully you'll see positive changes, but sometimes it takes longer than you may think. It's helpful if everyone keeps high expectations and assumes the best of their team members. We can support the team by bringing the question back to them. How do we want to handle advisor change requests? And then make sure everyone follows through on the expectations we create together. So now let's go to Megan for our second case study.
For this scenario, the advising supervisor receives an email from a parent complaining about the student's current advisor. The email reads, "My son is a sophomore at the institution. He just completed summer school and is starting his fall classes. He overcame a lot of adversity last year, from academic probation to losing his father to cancer. He's been trying to get some direction on how to proceed with some of his classes in his new major, but his advisor doesn't seem willing to help. In orientation, you indicated you had all types of help for students to keep them in school and from getting discouraged and dropping out. However, we cannot seem to find answers or what department he needs to go and see. Please help. More detail from the email gives a little more background to what the parent and student are feeling. The change of major resulted in being assigned an advisor in the new major. The student had a relationship with a previous advisor for 3 years, and the student is struggling with depression and is considering dropping out, but won't share this with his current advisor. So what would your first step be? Would you follow up with a student? Why or why not? Remember that while we are advising the student, we need to respect and honor their success team. This team often includes parents, so you don't want to immediately discount their concerns. One approach to including their team, especially if this is where the complaint is initiated, is to work directly with the student. Contact them, discuss details of the situation, etc. Then respond to the parent, letting them know that you've worked with the student. This not only opens up communication between the student and the parent, but also encourages the student to be the point person for their educational concerns. If your communication with the student is via email, the student can then share the message with their parents if they so choose. Would you in this situation follow up with the advisor? Why or why not? It's encouraged to follow up with the advisor just to determine all sides of the interaction. There may be valuable information that the advisor and student have shared that the parent may be unaware of. Having an idea of the big picture will help determine more of what the parent is concerned about and if steps have already been taken to address those concerns. What are some other things you might want to consider? As advisors, we've often been tasked with requests or expectations that are outside of our professional role. It is often assumed that we are a one-stop shop for students and should be able to help them holistically with every issue that they face. As you know, this isn't realistic, nor is it a good idea. This student obviously had a lot happen in his life over the past few years. While we, as advisors, are able to assist with the exploration of a new major, we aren't qualified to address his mental health struggles. This is where expectations of advising come into play, and how making referrals to connect students with appropriate resources is sometimes the best thing for the student. When making referrals, however, it's important to make warm referrals. Give the student as much information about the office that they're being referred to, such as the name, phone number, and office location of the person to whom you are referring them. Maybe even assist the student with writing down some questions that will help them get the information and assistance they are looking for. And of course, if a student is in a fragile state, it's encouraged to even walk the student to the appropriate office if that's what the situation warrants. This can often lead to compassion fatigue, and I'll let Josh discuss this in further detail.
Thanks, Megan. We all know advising can be demanding at times, leading to increased levels of stress and burnout when dealing with students undergoing challenging circumstances. The expectations on advisors seem to be ramping up, and the rewards can sometimes seem remote. Advisors can interact with students undergoing significant personal challenges and traumatic events. Certainly losing a parent or other close relative can be a significant traumatic event with repercussions that last for some time, and advisors interact with students experiencing many difficult and different life events each day. In this case study, the new advisor does not yet have the relationship established with the student, yet may still receive information and hints about the student's background and current concerns. When the student does share this recent loss, the advisor could be at risk for secondary traumatic stress, taking on the feelings and emotions of the student helped. Feelings such as depression or dread for the death of a loved one, preoccupation or intrusive thoughts, and an increased sense of apathy could occur. Alternatively, the advisor may feel that he or she is called on to be the super advisor, someone who is able to solve every problem and break down every barrier to the student's success. Setting boundaries and ensuring that each student has the tools and resources to become their own advocate is an essential part of the education process, and indeed, a developmental task that advisors should tend to in their practice. Next, we'll go back to Megan to share the real outcomes of this case study.
So before I share the actual outcome, it's important for you to determine how you're going to research the situation. Many campuses document each student interaction. If this is the case for you, do you have access to the advising notes or past emails? Can you access information on how many times and how frequently a student has had contact with his or her advisor. Be prepared to continue the research path if the stories don't match. This might mean additional conversations and even more interactions. Again, when working through conflict or through a complaint, we need as complete of a picture as possible as to what transpired so that we can ensure we are taking the best action for all involved. So the outcome for this scenario was a conversation with the advisor in the student's newly declared major, where it was discovered that the advisor had made multiple outreach attempts to the student, but the student never responded. Thus, the student had no interaction with the advisor. So when the new advisor, quote, didn't seem willing to help, it was quite the opposite. The student, however, simply hadn't taken the first step to connect with his advisor. The supervisor followed up with both the student and the advisor, but the student also never responded to the many outreach attempts by the supervisor. So, no action was taken in this case. One more question to ask yourself is whether or not you document anything, even though no action was taken. So, Dawn, I'm going to pass it over to you to discuss the final scenario.
Thanks, Megan. So our case study 3, this is probably the toughest one, and we're coming at it from the advising administrator lens. It starts off with an email from an advisor to me. Hey, Dawn, I was visiting the campus center office last week. One of their student staff told me that they felt uncomfortable and unsupported by their current advisor and didn't feel safe visiting their office. I told them they could just come and talk to me more generally about their situation, but then they emailed me wanting to come in and complete graduation paperwork. I'm still happy to meet with them, but I'm not sure what to do since they really do need to meet with their current advisor for graduation clearance. What should I do? Wow, so didn't feel safe visiting their advisor's office. That raises all kinds of red flags for advisors and administrators. But you know, let's take a step back for a moment. We don't know what that statement means to that student. So how can an administrator get to the bottom of the situation without using leading questions? How can you remain neutral and supportive to the student and to the reporting advisor and to the advisor the complaint is being made about? So again, coming back to what are some things to consider. So how do you support staff and students? You want to make sure that you aren't taking things at face value from students or other staff members. You want to hear all sides. You want to remain fair and consistent. From the advisor's perspective, words like unsafe immediately cause one to pause and take stock of the situation. What does that word mean to this person in front of them? Will they need to report something to a campus authority? Many advisors will go to their supervisor or the supervisor of the person the student is talking about. It all depends on relationships and reporting lines. If you're an advising administrator, you want to make sure that you keep those lines of communication open. If this scenario results in a formal performance plan, how can the supervisor create a safe space for the advisor to continue to improve? How can you continue to make them feel supported even though you're asking for corrective behavior? How do you protect the student if that's necessary? And do you have an obligation to report? So complaints may not always feel this serious, but complaints are typically escalated to the advising administrator. There can be a lot of negative energy coming to you in the role of administrator. So as an administrator, how do you handle that negativity and stress from scenarios like these? So Josh, what can administrators do?
Thanks, Don. One significant cause of concern for supervisors is providing adequate and meaningful supervision and guidance to staff. Significant stress can accrue when advising staff do not live up to the expectations of a supervisor or of the institution itself. Role conflict can be at play here, as supervisors, who often come with advising backgrounds, want to support their staff while also taking appropriate, if difficult, corrective action. Complicating matters is that this situation comes to you from a third party, and acting on incomplete or inaccurate information can have consequences for all involved. Advising administrators are advised to use caution when working with staff who exhibit performance issues and should consult with others, including HR professionals, about options and constraints in dealing with staff members. Documentation, even though sometimes tedious, is a part of the job and will help you reflect on how best to handle these concerns in a way that is consistent with your values as well as with institutional norms and policies. When supervisors act rashly, even with the best of intentions, those actions have repercussions for how they are perceived, as well as the functioning of the team. Practicing advisors need to feel supported and engaged, and be assured that they have an advocate with some authority and ability to get things done to improve, to the best of their ability, the quality of work-life experienced. Supervisors should take a developmental approach to staff, meeting them where they are and assisting them in achieving ever greater levels of institutional knowledge, networks, and academic advising skills so that all students can benefit. On the part of administrators, role conflict is a near constant struggle. Being in the middle of a bureaucracy means the administrator has to supervise and monitor the effectiveness of the team while also managing and promoting the image and work of the team to more senior administrative positions. Even though supervisors may control some level of institutional resources, they are not often in charge of strategic budgetary decision-making and institutional priorities long-term. This creates the need to think carefully about how to balance the role of a supervisor as a mentor and coach, as well as the requirement to set minimum expectations and hold advising staff accountable for meeting those daily. Finally, documenting situations where tension and emotions are high is paramount. Human memory is sometimes faulty, and providing additional information and details that may be difficult to remember with clarity later is really important, not only for performance improvement purposes, but also in the case of ongoing concerns. It's always helpful to have a factual record of what happened in order to support any subsequent claims regarding the role of the administrator in evaluating and addressing student concerns that arise from time to time. Now, back to Dawn to share what really happened.
Thanks, Josh. So in this case, through the reporting advisor, I invited the student to come in and talk with me. So because the student had expressed concern about their safety, although they didn't share that with me personally, it was important for me to protect their identity. Just an added bit about this particular interaction is that both the advisor and the student could be defined as a protected class under Title IX requirements. So again, important for me to protect their identity. What I was able to share with the advisor is some examples of email communication that was not personal in nature, but that illustrated the student's concerns. I gathered examples, printed them out, highlighted the problematic language, and then left these examples with the advisor. As a best practice, after meeting with your employee, you should send a follow-up email outlining your conversation and the next steps for both of you. These next steps should include expectations for improvement. It's important that you know that email is considered a formal form of documentation. However, we spend so much time on email, it often doesn't feel formal enough in these situations. It's a good idea to connect with your campus human resources or employee relations office if you're considering formal actions such as a printed letter of reprimand or possibly even the separation process. So now you're probably wondering, what is separation? Well, it's a nicer way of saying you're fired. You want to consider the severity of the issue, and then you want to decide whether or not you want to allow the person to resign should they ask for that option. This process is never an easy one and can have all of the negative effects Josh has been telling us about. So Josh, let's talk about self-care.
Thanks, Dawn. You out there, are you a super person, super advisor? Do all the students rely on you? Your colleagues, your friends? It really feels good to be someone that they can rely on. But sometimes you need a break and your own help. One cannot be a super person forever. Even Clark Kent had Supergirl, not to mention Lois Lane. Superpersons have some of the following characteristics. They rarely take a day off. They often answer emails, voicemails, and text messages into the evening, can have rigorous demands of themselves and others. They might often wonder why students don't just behave themselves like I did when I was in college. They could also be frustrated with themselves or others for poorer than expected student outcomes. As an advising administrator myself, I struggle with these type of expectations. I can tell you that avoiding burnout is more of a do as I say, not as I do sort of thing for me. But managing expectations of yourself and others is crucial to your own effectiveness in your work as well as in other aspects of your life. So I want to take a moment and just give you permission It is okay not to be a super person, at least not all the time, but to practice what we call work-life negotiation. Work-life negotiation is an ongoing conversation among you, your supervisor, staff, and your significant others regarding work and life priorities. It is always subject to reevaluation and negotiation. Work-life negotiation is a fairly new paradigm, understanding that work-life balance, as in a 50-50 split between your work and your life, is just not reasonable. After all, there are 168 hours in each week. Do you really plan on spending 84 of them working? I hope I don't. Work-life negotiation involves specifying and adjusting expectations for work, home, family, school, personal, spiritual, and other needs. The priority and effort placed on each will vary over time, and the specifics will have to be worked out on a continual basis with those family, friends, partners, and other significant people in your life. A major key, and there really is no one key, to improving your chances of compassion satisfaction and lowering risk for burnout and secondary traumatic stress is open communication with your supervisor, significant others, family, and friends about what you're able to reasonably commit yourself to, knowing that you're likely to spend more time sleeping each week than working. Practicing effective work-life negotiation will allow you to recharge your batteries in other fulfilling activities with people you love and appreciate so that you're able to fill the bucket of others in your working life. Here's hoping you will take those lessons to heart. Let's come back to Megan with some things to consider about complaints.
So a few things to think about while dealing with complaints. Is there a difference between how you receive the complaint? If the complaint comes to you via a survey or an email, a phone message, or a conversation, does that change the impact or how you handle it? Does the administrator always need to meet with the affected student? If you do meet with the student, are you ready to fully commit to student-centered service in the moment? If the student needs an advising session or schedule planning, are you ready to advise them? Do they need a warm referral to another resource? What options can you actually offer to them in the moment? And how do you handle FERPA and other parties that may need to know more about the outcome of the student meeting? Follow your institution's policies and applications regarding FERPA while keeping in mind those members of the student success team that I mentioned earlier. One last thing to consider is the significance of the complaint and if there is a pattern. Do you need to develop a performance improvement plan for an advisor? Do you need to begin the separation process with them? Conversely, is there a pattern of behavior with the student, irrespective of whom it is they are interacting with? How will you handle a situation then? So the main thing to remember is to simply meet the student where they are. We need to honor their experiences and realities while working to assess the situation and determine what it is the student actually needs. After all, we're the ones lucky enough to get to work with students every day in professions that we love. So, Josh, what are some things that advisors and administrators can do immediately to improve their compassion satisfaction?
Thanks, Megan. This image does a good job of encapsulating many of the tips and strategies that advisors and advising administrators can use right now to improve the quality of their work lives and, in turn, support each other and the work we do for student success. Getting and staying happy and healthy with a positive balance or work-life negotiation and realistic expectations of yourself and others can go a long way toward improving one's level of compassion satisfaction and reducing one's risk for compassion fatigue. Some of my key takeaways from the Greater Good Science Center at UC Berkeley are: 1. Paying attention and being mindful of your thoughts and feelings as you interact with students is really important. Taking a few minutes to reflect on your interaction with a student, not just making notes about the content, but the feelings and emotions that the visit may have brought up is key to self-assessment and self-care. 2. Give thanks. Building hope is about recognizing the positive, focusing on student strengths, assets, and resilience in the face of difficult academic coursework and often challenging personal circumstances. Giving thanks and recognizing the impact that others have on you and your ability to meet the needs of others can create a virtuous cycle by which you fill their bucket and they, in turn, fill yours. 3rd, get moving. Regular exercise, even 20 minutes per week or 3 times a week, can dramatically improve your mood and outlook on life. Our bodies do need a healthy mix of foods, and students are relying on us to be prepared and focused with each and every interaction. Eating poorly or not at all can cause not only declines in overall health, but also impact our effectiveness as trusted advisors and meaningful mentors for students. 4, keep close friends. And in this case, quality really does trump quantity. Spend time with close friends and make time for them to share your stories and share the meaningful interactions that you have with students while keeping confidentiality in mind will serve to improve your mindset and share the values and strengths that you perceive you give to others and the feedback and support that students and your colleagues give to you. This is a key way that we can fill each other's buckets, is to share really powerful stories of student success and how students overcame difficulties in their academic coursework as well as in their life, and one thing I highly encourage. We want to take a moment and thank everyone who has attended the webinar today. We really have covered a lot of ground. Today, we've discussed some common and not so common complaint scenarios, as well as some ways in which advising practice can impact an advisor and advising administrators' quality of life. We've also addressed some self-care strategies to encourage advisor wellness and longevity in these important positions that promote student success. As I always say, the quality of an advisor's experience is the quality of the student's experience, and they're directly related. So the better we can do for advisors and for advising administrators, the better we'll all do towards student success, engagement, retention, graduation, and all the things that we really care about. We'll now turn it over to Megan for our question and answer session. Megan, take it away.
Again, we'd like to thank everyone for attending the webinar today. We've saved some time to answer any questions that you may have. We've had some come in throughout the webinar. If you have questions, feel free to go ahead and type them in now and send them to us, and we will address them as they come in. The first question I'm seeing here is, what should I do if there's a problem with another advisor, but I don't feel comfortable talking to my boss?
I'd like to answer that one, Megan. So for me, what it really depends on is those relationships. So sometimes maybe you just need to have the conversation with the other advisor. It really depends on what the problem is. So easy example is someone is standing right outside your door having a conversation with another staff member when you're trying to lead an advising meeting. It's probably not helpful or going to have a good outcome if you go to the boss and say, hey, this person's talking outside my door. It's more helpful to go directly to that person and say, you know, when you are right outside my door having a conversation, I'm struggling to hear my advisee. I'm wondering if you could please take it down the hallway, or how might I signal you that it's a problem for me? In other places where it is significant and it is something that a supervisor needs to address, there might be no way around it. You do have to talk to the boss. And probably the best thing you can do is write down some questions, just like we prompt students to do this when they go visit faculty. You're going to write down some questions and then practice those questions on someone that knows you well, someone that you can trust. That might be a significant other, that might be a partner, it might be a coworker, but that can be difficult because that can feel like gossiping. Practice your questions a little bit, get an outside perspective to make sure that you're on the right track, and then finally always offer a solution. So if you come with a complaint, you don't want to be seen as a complainer. That's not going to get you anywhere. So come with a solution to say, maybe you just need to let your boss know, hey, sometimes people are having conversations in the hallway. When I have a student, I'm going to close my door. Or when I'm working on a project, I'm going to close my door. Just wanted to let you know that. So that's how I would answer that question.
Great, thanks. The next question I'm seeing here is, what advice do you have for an advisor who wants to get the day started right with limited stress?
I think I'll take that one, Megan. So I'd like to answer it kind of in two ways, and what I always encourage advisors to do, and in my work with this topic of compassion fatigue and compassion satisfaction, there's a key focus here on beginning and ending the day well. So when we're ending the day, my suggestion is really to focus on what one person or one student that you really interacted with positively and that you can see the results of your work. So reflecting back on that day, how did you really make a difference in the lives of a student, the life of a student? You might also, throughout the day, take a break, get up, walk around the office, say hello to people, engage with a small circle of colleagues as you can, maybe during lunch, and really take a moment to disconnect with those work responsibilities and then reconnect when you're back in the office or your workspace. In terms of at the start of the day, I like to start by thinking about what my day is going to look like and planning that out and trying to get a sense of who I'm working with. If I have scheduled appointments, how do I prepare for those so that I'm hitting the ground running from the very start? So when that first student comes to see me, I'm ready and prepared. I'm not scrambling and adding additional stress to my work day. At the same time, I like to work and say, can I get a situation where I'm spreading out students that may be more difficult throughout the day? Instead of handling all these challenging cases in a row, could I have them a bit apart so I can take a bit of a mental break before I go and handle them afterwards? So there are ways that we can set ourselves up for success, and certainly eating right, sleeping well, getting a good breakfast, starting the day positively and ending it positively will certainly help.
Thanks. I'd like to remind you, if you have questions, go ahead and submit those now. We'll keep moving on to the next question here in the queue. So my group advises in a pod situation, meaning that the student may choose any advisor in our group that they want to meet with. I often have lines outside my door, and students have complained that they've had bad experiences with other advisors. How do I handle that without getting burned out?
So I'd like to answer that one, Megan, or at least get us started. So one of the things that jumps out at me here is this is a great spot for a supervisor to support all of the members of that team. If you have lines out your door, what are you doing that's different from those other advisors? So the first thing the supervisor can do is make that connection with you. How are you handling these students? What are you doing? And then connect with the rest of your team, showing that possibly you have the best practices here. It also helps when we have mentors, when we can mentor each other. And sometimes we see it a lot here at CU when we have new advisors, when somebody just thinks they don't know enough. But if we prompt that student, if we maybe give them some questions, how to lead off their advising appointment, that improves the advising quality for their interaction with those other advisors. And I'd also come back to the bad. What does bad experience mean? Is it they didn't get the answer they wanted to their question? Is it that you're the person that goes over and above and makes that warm referral and calls over to the bursar's office rather than sending someone across campus? So really just finding out, what are you doing that's so great? And let's get everyone to be great.
Anything to add to that, Josh? Or
well, I think that's a great response, and we're thinking along the same lines. I really would like to know what practices that advisor has that's causing them to be such a popular choice, and how can we use that as a training opportunity for other staff, and share that wealth and share that warmth with other students. So that's a great suggestion.
Great ideas. Next question. What are some examples of unrealistic expectations from students, and how do you handle them?
So I can start off with, in my example, the unrealistic expectation that the student had in my example was that the advisor should know everything about every academic program on campus. As we know, things change daily. Policies are changing every year, every semester, and we can't know everything. And so what we want to do is make sure that our advisors are okay with saying, you know what, it is really, really important to me to give you the right answer, the best answer, and I'm going to need time to research that. So what's the best way to get back to you? Should I text you? Should I send you an email? How do you want me to follow up with you? And that way the student feels heard, they feel like they're going to get the right answer, and it gives that advisor just a little bit of time to do some research. So the other part of that, the unrealistic expectations, and this may come down to definition. So a lot of students have been, we come back to that helicopter parent, and sometimes students feel like we're the parent, like we need to fix everything for them. And as I think Megan brought it up, we're not going to fix everything for them. There's areas we don't have expertise in counseling necessarily, and so we feel honored when a student is sharing an experience, a really intense experience with us, but at the same time, we're not the best resource. So making sure that we connect them and let them know what our boundaries are. So Josh, what would you add?
I think that's absolutely true. There are a lot of examples of unrealistic expectations, and for students. One of the things I would suggest, and what I've tried to ask my staff to do, is to make sure we're documenting effectively. And I've provided some scaffolding and some examples of how to do that, because when we have interactions with students, we can say exactly the right thing and provide them with the information that they need to move forward. At the same time, if we don't document what we've done, the student will hear something that maybe we didn't intend. And so as a best practice, and as something I know many of us try to do consistently, we really need to document what we said when we said it and what the student's next step was, and that we communicated that to them, so we can come back if there are concerns about expectations and what was said. We can have documentation as to how we approach that issue.
Thanks, Josh. So Don, this one follows on the heels of a comment you just made. We often talk about helicopter parents. How do we balance being supportive of students and also meeting their family expectations?
This is an especially good one for me, because now I am a parent of college-age students. And so in thinking about that helicopter parent, why is the parent there? Why is the parent involved in this interaction? It's because they want the best possible outcome for their student. So shutting them off makes them fearful. That's the fear of what we don't know. Here at Boulder, we like to talk about helium parenting. And so helium parenting is thinking of the student, the son or daughter, as the helium balloon, and we have like a nice long ribbon on it, so the parent can hold on to that ribbon. They can let their student soar into the air, but they still have that safety net to pull them back in close when the weather is rough. So we want to make sure, at least here at CU Boulder, we want to include those parents in the conversations when it's appropriate, when the student desires that interaction. Of course, there are times when parents are involved and the student definitely doesn't want that interaction. Just want to remind you that FERPA says you may share information, not you must share information. Your relationship is with the student, and that's what you want to keep first and foremost in your interactions.
Okay. Myrna Cohen asks, please address the use of advising syllabus to clarify expectations of advisors and students. Josh or Don?
Does CU Boulder use advising syllabi extensively? Our system is so different that I'm not sure that it's consistent across the state for IB Tech. I certainly think that's a good place to start, distributing that and ensuring that students read it and understand it. Those are two different hurdles that have to be managed. But it is a great place to start the conversation and say, this is something that the college expects, and this is part of the advising relationship. I do think that advising syllabus gives us a springboard to talk about, particularly with helicopter parenting or fighter pilot parents and things like that, to say part of the educational mission of advising is to increase the student's ability to make good academic decisions with information that's available, and also to advocate for themselves for the resources and assistance that they need. And so I would call ourselves all on the same team here, but we have a number of different perspectives on how we go about that. You know, our parents are just trying to help make sure their students do the best that they can. I really believe that. And so they may be approaching it in a way that that inhibits that growth that we want in students. And so if we can come to a point where we say we're all on the same team here, we all have the same goals, let's find a way we can get to it together, that works very well for me typically. Don, you may have other thoughts.
Yeah, we do develop advising syllabi here at CU Boulder, and part of it is just as they get syllabi in the classroom, we want to make sure our contact information is in there. If we have learning outcomes for the advising relationship, we also typically will have like expectations, the things students should do or know by the end of their first year, by the end of their second year. And then sometimes ambitious advisors that want to change it every semester will also add some dates and deadlines. So it's a really nice use. And then to save paper, because we are a green campus, most of our advisors will post that on their departmental websites.
Okay, CSU asks, what if being great at advising means creating a codependent relationship? How does one decipher that situation?
Well, I'll try to address this one, and without more information, it's kind of a thorny one to approach. Codependent is the key term here for me, and that has an actual meaning that maybe we don't have enough time to get into, but I would argue that, and the other question is, what does great mean? Because being a great advisor, in my view, means supporting and providing resources and scaffolding to assist students to greater levels of autonomy and interdependence with their colleagues and with their faculty and so on. And so I would kind of question the codependence as being a goal of advising generally, but laying that aside, my suggestion in this regard is to really sit down with that advisor, and if it is codependent, we're going to have to work together to set reasonable expectations and boundaries and saying this relationship isn't the one we want to have happen. It has to be a professional relationship that has boundaries that are respected by all parties. And so when we have a situation where a codependency exists, there are things that there certainly can be referrals to campus counseling centers and other professionals that might be able to help the advisor and student involved get through this. And without more information, I'd have a hard time going further than that without knowing more. But in my view, great advising is about providing options and service to students to help them make good academic decisions that support their life and career goals and academic goals as well. And we have to keep in mind the constraints of our practice because there are certainly things that we don't want to be involved with and we're not qualified to be involved with as well.
Anything to add there, Dawn?
No, that was great. Thanks, Josh.
Sure. It looks like we have time for one more question here. Myrna Cohen asks, how do you handle a situation where a student complains unfairly on public social media?
So I guess I'll start off with that. It's actually very similar to when advisors complain about their supervisors or any of us. Basically, freedom of speech. They have protected speech, and they can say whatever they like. The best thing for you is just to remain a good role model. If it's causing you the stress or those feelings, some of those things Josh was talking about, it's a good time to talk to your support web, whether that's your supervisor or a partner. But just knowing it's going to happen, not everyone's going to like us. Most people are going to like us because we're pretty awesome people, and we just have to live with that.
You know, Don, I've seen a lot of people actually respond on social media using their media relations folks and their outreach staff, and they've turned around a lot of those concerns into very satisfied students and parents. And so I've been involved in some of those, addressing those concerns, and students and the folks have absolutely right to make those comments. It's how we approach them, how we address them that really makes a difference, and turning concerns into advocates is really what we're about, and what skilled communication can do for us.
Great, thanks for adding that, Josh. So I just want to say thank you to everyone for joining us today. You have our contact information in the handout if you have other questions or want to follow up on anything. We'll also let you know that in your handout is a follow-up activity where you can do some of that professional work-life balance, a questionnaire, a survey that Josh has used in the past. And we just want to thank you for joining us. It's been a great time.